Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3.
Somebody told me there's going to be a great teacher here today, so I thought I better show. Good morning, Ed.
You never know what people will tell you.
Am I sitting down too close? Should I go back?
No, that's perfect right there.
Somebody's going to sit in this row over there.
Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Casey, thank you for getting those doors. Thanks for getting those doors, Casey. Well, it looks like if we sing in rounds right now, Casey is going to have a solo. If we sing in rounds.
Well, I had to balance it a little bit.
So just had a thought. There were some of us that were out last night and having some fun together, and I was just having a thought that I forgot to share with Pat last night. Was I just recently met a theoretical physicist, and I was really embarrassed because I never realized that they were real. You have to think about that one for a little while. And I think Greg got it, and he's just not impressed. Yeah. I met a theoretical physicist, and I found out they're real. Who would have thought they were real? So let's say a quick prayer. Father, thank you so much for blessing us. Thank you for this time we're able to spend together and to learn about your word, and more importantly, help us to learn how this applies to us today and how it helps our lives and us get closer to you. In Christ's name, amen. So one of the things that's kind of woven into the lesson today is puzzles, trying to figure things out, figure out how you're supposed to respond to things. Frank, if you don't mind, I'm going to use your name at the beginning here. So most of us, if not everybody, has heard about Frank and his team and all the different people that were involved, about how somebody had a vision for a new kind of printer. But there was a lot of things that they had to come up with. They had to invent. It was a huge puzzle. All these different pieces had to get invented in order to then invent the puzzle itself. Very, very complicated. But what were they doing with that? What was going on about solving the puzzles? They had a purpose. They had some goal that they were going towards. And yet it wasn't just as easy about a matter of just, okay, we'll just put it together. They had to figure out all these different things, and they even had to figure out, well, what is the puzzle to begin with? So complicated, when you've got that big goal and you're working towards that. And in a lot of ways, that's what the Israelites were doing coming into the Promised Land. It was the Promised Land, but they had to figure out how they were supposed to do that, how they were supposed to respond, and what they were supposed to do exactly. So I always think in terms with this lesson and this series, as far as these are real people, and they're trying to figure out what they're supposed to do. Just like us today, we've got the Bible, but we need to figure out what it means and how to respond to it and how to follow it. There's a puzzle there. So not everything is just handed to us, and it's so simple and so easy. We've got puzzles we've got to do. Now, I'm fairly certain, as great as the invention was of the inkjet printer, I'm fairly certain the Israelites would have no appreciation for it. Not at all. Not at all. They just don't have any computers to hook it up to. You don't have the computer, the printer's not that great, Frank, so, there you go.
But they did get a printer on Mount Sinai, I hear.
Oh, what was that? The Rockjet printer? I'm going to coin that phrase now. So thinking in terms of riddles and puzzles. So today we're going to be reading from Joshua chapter 7. And one of the thoughts of this, where we're going into right now, is we're going to be reading about probably the first time in this book, in this part with the Israelites coming into the Promised Land, first time that God was furious at the Israelites. Wasn't a little annoyed. He was way beyond that. He was furious with them. Why would God be furious with the Israelites? It's in Joshua chapter 7, verses 1 through 5. But the Israelites were unfaithful. I'm sorry, let me just stop real quick. So our story last week was where they took Jericho. So they went through and they marched around 7 times, or 7 days. They may have marched around actually more, but they marched around over 7 days, and then walls came down. It still wasn't easy. They still had to do some fighting. It wasn't just miraculously it was all there. But fairly easily, because the puzzle is, our army is coming up to this city. We're supposed to take that city. Big, strong walls. Okay, well, how am I going to do that? And I'm sure that their military people were thinking, okay, we're going to have this, we're going to need to do this is how we're getting over that wall, here's how we're getting through that gate. They were coming up with a puzzle. God had a different way of solving it as they learned. So that's where they went. So this is immediately following them taking Jericho. So let me start again in verse 1. But the Israelites were unfaithful in regard to the devoted things. Achan, son of Carmi, the son of Zimri, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of them. The Lord's anger burned against Israel. Now Joshua sent his men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Bethaven, to the east of Bethel, and told them, "Go up and spy out the region." So the men went up and spied out Ai. When they returned to Joshua, they said, "Not all the army will have to go up against Ai. Send 2,000 or 3,000 men to take it, and do not weary the whole army, for only a few people live there." So about 3,000 went up, but they were routed by the men of Ai, who killed about 36 of them. They chased the Israelites from the city gates as far as the stone quarries and struck them down on the slopes. At this, the hearts of the people melted in fear and became like water. So they just took Jericho, probably one of the largest, strongest cities in the entire area, that immediate area there. And the walls had come down for them. Their next focus is Ai, a much smaller city, probably smaller walls, not as fortified. And they sent in spies, like they did before, to find out what was there. Good plan. You want to know what's there. And they come back, it's not so strong. 2,000 or 3,000 people, we don't need to worry about that. And they sent them in, and it says that they chased them when the Israelites got routed, they chased them from the gates. So they were at the walls. They were right there. Open battle. And they got chased out. 3,000 got chased out. That's a mob. That's chaos. When you've got 3,000 running, just scattering. Utter chaos. And not just that they ran away, they were being chased. So one of the things is, one of the thoughts is, in our language we say today, what comes before a fall? Pride. Pride cometh before a fall. Yeah, I think most of us would know that saying. Does that sound like something with the Israelites right here? It does sound like something they were falling into. Already. They hadn't even been in the promised land very long. And already they're having some issues.
They're making decisions outside of God's will, right? They took things and he said, don't take that.
The city of Ai was the next place to go, but yes, you're right. There's different terms that are used for it. The sacrament items, the different items, but the instructions, like we learned last week, was they were not supposed to take any plunder from Jericho. Nothing. That was their thing. I don't know specifically what they were told about Ai, but it didn't matter. They had already made the problem, specifically one person that we have in the name here. So there was a problem because the instructions weren't followed. So, and I don't think Frank's in here, but when we're talking about those printers, if you don't follow those instructions in order to do something, what happens? There's a reason why we've got those instructions. And yeah, God had instructed them to do a certain thing in Jericho, and that wasn't followed completely. Yeah, so, what was that, Jerry?
God strikes you down. You follow it, boom.
So now with the puzzle, the Israelites that were there, they knew they got routed. So if you put yourself in their place, they just took Jericho, and now they went to this smaller place, and they got routed. It did not work. Well, they don't know why. It's like, what's going on? This is what God's telling us to do. Why is this a problem? Yeah.
This is kind of a big thing. They never lost people. They've always won.
Yeah, against larger opponents. Yeah. So we already know why God allowed them to be defeated right here, because with this reading here. But the Israelites themselves, at this point, they don't know that. So let's read. Let's start into verses. Let's jump ahead just a little bit to verses 20 through 26.
Ed?
Yes, sir.
So I wonder if there's maybe more going on than just the Achan's thing. 'Cause I don't see anywhere in here where they consult God. God was very direct with Jericho, very specific instructions. And I wonder if the part of the concern from God is that they didn't consult anything else. That's part of your pride comment that you made. I wouldn't need God, we got this one covered.
Yeah, yeah, that could be. That could be a lot more going on. It's we're complicated people. They would have been complicated people there, and sometimes it's not always just one simple answer. There might be a key thing, but there's not necessarily just one answer. Gail, when you raise your drink, just remember that moves your hand, and this is like like an auction. If you move, then
Well, I was just gonna say, we do that today, don't we? We just take things in our own hand, and when it doesn't work out, we say, oh, well, maybe.
You should talk pray to God now, instead of praying first. We do the same thing a lot of times.
yeah. So maybe pray first before that.
Say if nothing else, pray, but we should do that first.
Yeah, Roland.
Well, not to say that that's not right, but verse 10 says, the Lord answered Joshua when he tore his clothes and said, stand up, you were right. What are you doing laying on your face? Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant, which I commanded them to keep. They have taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen. They have lied. They have put them in their own possession. That is why the Israelites cannot stand against the enemy. So, I think God identifies it is a sin, and it is because, there's sin in the camp, that he didn't stand with them. I'm not saying that they didn't, they should have consulted God, but I think he said, oh, the land is yours, take it. He already told them that, so I don't know that that's, if it's the pride so much as it is really a sin here that is done undetected, and it is poisoning the camp.
So how does the sin of one person mess up the whole camp? All of the Israelites. Can the sin of one person infect everybody?
I was gonna say Eve, but that's long before this situation.
Well-
Messed up the whole world because of that, her disobedience and whatever, right?
We have specific consequences now that relate directly to that. Oh, Frank, there's one more up here.
Yeah, I think the sin of a nation can affect people in the same way that the sin of a parent can affect children, and there are consequences. As the Bible specifically notes that God is going to punish that unless the person repents of their sin. And I think how this plays out is, let's say I'm a dad
So it matters what each of us says and does. It matters, and it matters to the whole family. It matters to everybody. So that's all very good points there. So let's start with verse 20, chapter 7, verse 20, through 26. So leading right up to this, as Roland was getting into that with his part, was so God led them through how to figure out who had sinned. He told Joshua, there's sin. Somebody kept this stuff. Somebody took some of the plunder. But they didn't know who it was. So those verses just prior to this is the account of how God led them to which it was. Started with the tribe, then went down to the family, then went down to the men in each of that family, and it went on down. So it came down to a specific person. God led them to that part. But it was a puzzle. At that point, they knew kind of what was going on, but they didn't know who it was. They didn't know exactly where this specific problem was. God led them to that, and this is where we start in verse 20. Achan replied, "It is true, I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I have done. When I saw in the plunder a beautiful robe from Babylonia, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and took them. They are hidden in the ground inside my tent with the silver underneath." So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent, and there it was, hidden in his tent with the silver underneath. They took the things from the tent and brought them to Joshua, and all the Israelites brought them to Joshua and all the Israelites, and spread them out before the Lord. Then Joshua, together with all Israel, took Achan, son of Zerah, and the silver, the robe, the gold bar, his sons and daughters, his cattle, donkeys, and sheep, his tent, and all that he had, to the valley of Achor. God's not happy, and thus the Israelites are not happy when they figured out what that was. So in verse 25, Joshua said, "Why have you brought this trouble on us? The Lord will bring trouble on you today." Then all Israel stoned him, and after they had stoned the rest, they burned them. Over Achan, they heaped up a large pile of rocks, which remains to this day. Then the Lord turned from his fierce anger. Therefore, that place has been called the Valley of Achor ever since. So today in our society, in our country, most of the states don't have a death penalty, but a few do. But even of the ones that do have a death penalty, there's a lot of care to try to do, to kill that person in a quick way. Don't make it agonizing torture and everything else. They make some kind of effort that, even on the few states that do that. But we certainly don't take the whole family out and their house and all their animals and everything else. And this is what's right here. So what do you think about that? This is talking about a death penalty in a very large way. Everybody that's even associated with that person is gone, including even their animals. Is that harsh to hear in our society right now? Is that harsh to hear? I think we had one here and then Roland. Roland, you're up. Roland, you're up.
It is hard. This one here's one I think all of us will struggle with. It's a harsh reality, but a couple of things come to my mind. One is that you can't hide your sin from the Lord. This is buried in the tent. Nobody in Israel knew. Yet, the Lord, you can't hide control of a classroom is out of control. If you start too soft, you sometimes never can rein it in. And this looks to me like I'm telling Israel how severe this sin is. And God is making an example of them. This is what you do not do. Not only is it hard for this family because it's going to cost them their lives, but you know, there are 30.
Yeah. I think that up here and then Greg. So while that mic's coming to him, I just want to throw one thing in there real quick. So we must remember that God is dwelling among Israel and he's personally ruling over them. So today we pray to him and we've got our president, we've got the different things. God is ruling over them directly and giving him direct instructions through Joshua. So, yeah.
It used to bother me that the family was killed also. And after thinking about it, if we all lived in a tent, if we all lived in a tent, and Dad decided to bury something beneath the tent, I'm pretty sure the family would notice. And if they noticed, they didn't say anything. As long as we're talking guilt here. The animals I can't speak for.
Yeah, but the other people in the family possibly saw or knew something got stuck under the tent. Yeah. Yeah, Greg.
So, the Romans had a term called decimate, which we have taken. But the original term was 1/10 of every thigh. And they used it on any legion that broke the ram. Once they gathered them up, and they broke them into tens, under sword and spear. And then they drew lots, and the one who lost the lot, the other 9 beat him to death with sticks. And they did that all, it was either that or they just simply executed the entire legion, well, they couldn't afford that kind of loss in power. But that was how they disciplined retreating, cowardly armies. Crashes did it to a couple of legions that broke during the Spartacus realm, or during the Spartacus rebellion. Killed 10% of it. Those 2 legions turned out to be afterwards his best 2. They didn't break from anybody after that.
Yeah, very serious consequences. Yeah, you have to think about that. That's right. So, were you just scratching? Or? Okay, nap.
I think we forget that, you mentioned the one thing that's really important here is God is present. We're in the presence of God. I don't see any difference between this sin and Eve, eating the apple or whatever fruit it was and getting kicked out of the garden. And when sin entered, it was pretty harsh, just as harsh
Amen. That's right, he is. So with that punishment, then they heaped up a very large pile of rocks on him. They just kill him and burn him and took care of everything. They heaped up rocks. Why would you do a big pile of rocks? Why? The pile of rocks that I've seen in some different places they're huge. They'll be, it'll be larger than this auditorium, sometimes as high as this roof. One rock at a time, however big they are. It's a big effort. It's not just, okay, I threw a few rocks. It's like, no, this is a huge effort. Why would they do that?
More like a reminder.
Yeah.
I would say it's more like a reminder about the incidents that happened, so that when they see that,
Mm-hmm.
joggles their memory, not to. Can you hear me now? So I was saying it's more like a reminder, mostly for the Israelites. When they see that, it will remind them of the incident that happened in Achan, about how, like he said, just God is. That even though his, like Exodus says, his loving, is long suffering, compassionate, and kind, but he's just too, and not spared generation after generation after generation. That's just who God is, because he's God. So they see that, it'll be more like a reminder of what happened.
Yeah. And we need reminders. God puts a reminder in our sky all the time here in Oregon with our rain. A rainbow, a double rainbow. Every once in a while, a triple. Really rare for a triple. But God puts that rainbow out there. It's a reminder. We need those things. We need those reminders. And it talks about that, that even, you can even still see that pile there when this writer was putting there. And it's still there today. We know it. We know it's there. They taught their kids and kids, everything else. Here's what happened. Here's what that means. It's an opportunity for teaching. So I think, Linda, we're asking for the mic. Hold on just a second there.
Loud, I don't want to use the mic. It occurs to me that God had the people issue the punishment, and I can't imagine stoning someone. I just, because of my own sin, my own guilt, and here I'm dishing out punishment on someone, and I think, wow, if that doesn't impact you, that's got to be a real tool of God to say, okay, you may be sinful, but you're going to be the one who's going to stone this person for what they've done. And I just think that's incredible.
It's very sobering.
Oh, incredibly sobering.
Yeah.
But again, those without sin cast the first stone.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yet they did cast the first stone. They did cast the first stone. When Stephen was stoned to death, they cast the first stone.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen, remember him? The elder in the church? Stephen, a person that was serving God, picked by God, by a lot of things. And in the end, he was stoned to death also. Who was right by him? Who saved Stephen from his problem? Who saved Stephen from his problem? Who saved Stephen from those stones that hit him? And yet God was gracious with Stephen, and that he showed him a sight that he needed to see from God.
So let's jump forward just a little bit. Let's go to Joshua chapter 8. Verses 1 and 2. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged. Take the whole army with you and go up to attack Ai. For I have delivered into your hands the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land. You shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king, except that you may carry off their plunder and livestock for yourselves. Set an ambush behind the city. And then the story continues from there. God gives them some instructions, and they do that. Why do you think it was important then as a response for that? Why do you think it was important for him to tell Joshua, don't be discouraged, don't be afraid?
It wasn't very successful the last time. It would be scary to go back up again and wonder if God's with you. That having that reassurance directly, I'm sure, helped him to go ahead and carry through.
So if you have a failure, do you just stop? Or do you try again? Try a different method. In this particular case, they're going to try again. Remember, God is leading them directly. He's given them very specific instructions. He's telling them to go again. Don't stop. And maybe do it a little differently. And he gives them a specific plan. But God has blessed it because they had atoned. They had atoned and made it right with God. That's the important thing, being right with God. Like Nab was saying earlier. Oh, right over here again.
I think where Joshua had decided to only take a few people because of the spies report the first time, God tells him, take everybody. And I think there's probably some really big purpose in that, in having everyone see the success that God brings.
Yeah. So let's jump forward to verse 14. 14 and following. So Joshua 8, verses 14 through 21. When the king of Ai saw this, he and all his men of the city hurried out early on in the morning to meet Israel in battle at a certain place overlooking Arabah. But he did not know that an ambush had been set against him behind the city. Joshua and all of Israel let themselves be driven back before them, and they fled towards the wilderness. All the men of Ai were called to pursue them, and they pursued Joshua and were lured away from the city. Not a man remained in Ai or Bethel who did not go after Israel. They left the city open and went in pursuit of Israel. Then the Lord said to Joshua, Hold out towards Ai the javelin that is in your hand, for into your hand I will deliver the city. So Joshua held out toward the city the javelin that was in his hand. As soon as he did this, the men in the ambush rose quickly from their position and rushed forward. They entered the city and captured it and quickly set it on fire. The men of Ai looked back and saw the smoke of the city rising up into the sky, but they had no chance to escape in any direction. The Israelites who had been fleeing towards the wilderness had turned back against their pursuers. For when Joshua and all of Israel saw that the ambush had taken the city and that smoke was going up from it, they turned around and attacked the men of Ai. Those in the ambush also came out of the city against them, so that they were caught in the middle, with Israelites on both sides. Israel cut them down, leaving them neither survivors nor fugitives. So they won this one soundly. It's still war. It's not pretty. I'm sure there was a lot of frightened people. It doesn't tell us exactly if there was a death count, if Israel lost anybody. It doesn't tell us. It's hard to believe in a war that one side loses nobody. But it's possible. But it's possible. But the bigger picture here is not the war. The bigger picture is obedience. God gave them directions what they would do. They had a plan how they would do that, but more so than anything, God blessed it and his power made it happen so that they were successful. So because of them following God's directions on this, what were they allowed to do? They were allowed to keep the plunder from that city. So So that wouldn't have been going into the national, into all of the national money. Those families would have all been part of that. I think that all of the army was there in order to help this all happen correctly, the way that whole strategy was. But I believe that it also was so that everybody saw. You want everybody, you want every family to have a representative going back to them and saying, here's what happened. We never could have done this. God took care of this. It's again, God being in control of that. How does this relate to us today?
We're no less prone to having sin in the camp. I've sinned, you've sinned, we've all sinned. All men have fallen. Have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. All men have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That's all of us.
Yeah, we certainly need to help each other. We need to be forgiving. You know, through Jesus, we're taught to be forgiving people. God forgives us, certainly. You know, so we're forgiven. What does it teach us about unity? This whole story, what does it teach us about unity?
It matters who you have company with.
It matters who you have company with. Yeah. I keep seeing people in auctions almost bidding here. You get that little itch, and it's. Yeah.
Well, I think I could add something.
To kind of expound on what she said about unity, I think it does matter how much we surround ourselves with other fellow believers, because that way you can stir each other up. I have a friend here, and we always meet like once or twice a week to kind of stir each other up. And the whole point is for us not to, because I don't underestimate the sin in myself. I know that if I don't have the right guidance, if I don't have Christ in my life, I can tend to deviate. So it's very important that I meet with other Christians, to kind of discuss the Word of God, to keep each other in mind, because I know we're talking about war and battle, but in their time that was their own form of battle. In this life, in this generation, we have our own battles. And it's not necessarily, like I mentioned many times, it's not my battle against ours or against him. It's not flesh and blood. It's the principalities and powers and the rulers of darkness. That's what our war is. And how can we make sure that we endure to the end? Is true meditation on the Word of God, thinking about it, discussing it with other Christians, trying to see what we're falling short and pull each other up. That's what we need to be doing. And the more we do that, the more it's almost like the Word of God is in our head. And we can comfortably share with other people, share with our families, share with our extended families. Because that way you're just dragging people out of the fire. But I think it's James that talks about you love, you pull someone out of the fire. And that's what we need to be doing more often. So unity, I agree, that you'll find so much, especially in this wonderful church we all attend. Try to reach out to each other, try to see how we can help each other. With knowing the Word and acting, not just about reading it, but acting it out for the glory of God.
Yeah. What each of us does matters, good or bad.
He has used his microphone, he did. But they did loud enough.
Okay, we'll try better, Jerry.
Sorry, Jerry, we're doing the best we can.
We'll try harder, Jerry. So it does matter what each of us does, good and bad. And it matters not just us individually. Us individually, it matters to the whole. Because this is part of our relationship, part of our reconciliation with God, but that means it's our reconciliation with each other as well. That all plays a role in that, in how we do that. It looks like we're really close to time, so I just had a real quick question for you to close with. Because it matters as a whole in our relationship as well, in our body here, how we support each other, what role can we play in each other's success? How can I help Roland? How can I help you? How can I help Linda over here, even though she keeps moving her hand, but she's not asking for the microphone? That's the... So...
I told Linda if she keeps raising her hand, she's gonna buy a cow.
You got to fence an area in first before you get that cow. So, Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, great class today. Thank you, everybody. One thing that strikes me about the unity question is we as humankind can unify but not be unified under the proper banner or cause. I think one of our Christ connections today is to make sure that we're unified and pointing each other to God in the name of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, God and Jesus, that is the focus.
I was going to say the same thing, just my words are going to be unified in obedience, because this whole thing was about obedience, but unity in encouraging one another to obey the Lord, I think, is what I'm getting from this passage.
Yeah. And I think we had one last comment back here, and then we'll close.
Well, I was going to say that in order to encourage people, we have in our body, we have to know them. We have to know what's happening. So it comes down to relationship, just like our relationship with God. It has to be personal.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, be well fed and dressed, see you later. You know, we don't do that. We want to know what people's needs are.
Yeah, get to know people, spend time with people so that you can dig deeper and not just the, hi, how are you? Anyway, thank you everybody for coming to class today, and we'll see you in services in a few minutes. Everybody else, I just sort of pointing fingers.
Okay, so now you're live. You know, I thought of one just about 5 minutes ago. So I think we'll be all right. Be great. Okay, I am live. Hello? Hello. Testing, 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 testing. Can you hear me? I think I can hear myself over the loudspeaker. Whoop. Nope. Yes, no. Hello. Yes. Good. Button right here. Doesn't have the one here. I always hate when it that. Yeah. Last offer. It's not too late. Oh, I don't. No. Okay. Okay. Mm. Okay. Thank you, sir. Didn't mean to run off. Well, it's going to be kind of hard for me today. It's quite the trade-up, isn't it? No, actually. No. Leave that to have that. I mean, the only thing. Hello. Sure. Well, I hope so. Good, thank you. Here's Thomas. Thank you. We did. We did. We had a great trip. The kids were great. We got a lot of work done. It was a good time. No, did it? Oh, even hotter and drier. Grandpa did when he moved to Southern California. He went to go play golf. Yeah. Yeah. Uh, okay, I'm gonna have to go prepare. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh. Just generally when you travel in big cities, I mean, mine every day. That way I don't have to big and Oh, yeah, I mean, if you do that, you keep your phone in one pocket, your keys in the